the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Left center field, and there it is!
Tomorrow, baseball opens in Cincinnati. In July, the baseball world will converge here for the All-Star Game. And with a new baseball commissioner, have the stars finally aligned to allow Pete Rose to be reinstated and eligible for the Hall of Fame? Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. In many ways, the future of Pete Rose depends on public opinion. Cincinnati fans have made their voice heard for years, and important teammates of Pete in various periods have voiced their support.
Pete, of all the players that I played with, him and Frank Robinson are two of the very, very best. And Pete's paid his dues, and I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Definitely. He's waited long enough.
Pete Rose, I feel that this guy should be in the Hall of Fame, and hopefully he gets reinstated. But that's the first step as far as getting on the ballot. And if he ever makes the Hall of Fame, I think it'd be the most celebrated induction of all time.
Left center field, and there it is!
On another level, it's not about popular opinion and forgiveness. It's about what is right and wrong and the integrity of the game. I am joined this morning by Jeffrey Standen, the Dean of the Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. He teaches and publishes in the areas of sports law, gaming law, and criminal and civil remedies. One of his articles is entitled Pete Rose and Baseball's Rule 21. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you, Dan. Glad to be here.
Sports law, that could be fun. I mean, or at least fun aspects of it. I mean, there's, at least it's a lively field to be in.
Well, the sports world is wonderful for legal issues. There are always things happening on the field, off the field, with teams, with franchises, with the league. So it's a wonderful microcosm to study, and I really enjoy doing it.
So let's be clear, you're not from Cincinnati.
I'm afraid not. No,
okay.
I wasn't fortunate enough to be born here.
You didn't grow up being a Reds fan? You don't necessarily tied to the Reds?
No, I have another team with red in the color. That's my favorite, but it's a great, Cincinnati Reds are a great franchise.
Called the Red Sox?
The Red Sox, yeah, that's my
Boston.
team.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Which, is just a derivative of the Cincinnati Reds. I can tell you the history of that.
Okay.
But, so starting out here, Pete Rose voluntarily accepted assignment to, quote, the permanently ineligible list. The interesting thing I find about your argument is that you argue that it's Major League Baseball who, quote, reneged on its side of the deal. Now, how do you argue that? Why would you argue that MLB has done anything here?
Right. Well, that's a good question, Dan, and in an agreement like that, there were always promises exchanged, and Rose did promise for his part that he would voluntarily enter onto baseball's banned list, as you mentioned. He would not contest any more baseball's accusations. But in exchange, baseball made a promise as well. Major League Baseball promised to Rose that it would make no public findings as to whether or not Rose, in fact, bet on the Reds or bet on Major League Baseball. And that was the deal Rose made. And then almost just within a few days after Rose fulfilled his side of the bargain, Major League Baseball's investigator,
John
Dowd, publicly said, I believe on one of the ESPN portals, that Rose, in fact, was guilty as charged. And so Rose never got the benefit of the bargain that he had struck, that baseball would remain silent as to his guilt and innocence, and then the idea was he could apply for reinstatement a year or so later.
So, but it is a permanent ban. That's part. He was on the permanently ineligible list. But you're thinking that right from the beginning, the idea from Rose's point of view and MLB was that it was a temporary.
Well, it may have been permanent, but the idea that I've seen at several sources that Rose would reapply a year later, and maybe it would be granted, maybe not. But Dan, it's been 25 years now, right? And at some point, Rose has fulfilled his end of the deal.
Well, okay, let's say Major League Baseball didn't fulfill its terms of the deal. It went public in a way that it should not have in sort of this legal framework. But on the other side, Pete Rose went on for years denying that he had done anything wrong, only to eventually admit that he in fact did exactly what Major League Baseball said he did.
Right.
So he was lying. So how do you take that into account?
Good question. Rose did lie, and that's out there. The problem with that is that baseball didn't punish him for lying. It punished him for betting on the game. When someone like Pete Rose or some other public figure is caught up in the world of the court, if you will, of public opinion, they don't have the Fifth Amendment behind which to hide. They don't have a lawyer to speak for them. Really, the player is out there, and any form of denial, any form of putting the prosecutor, if you will, in this case Major League Baseball, to its proof, it does take the form of denial. You have to say no. I'm afraid, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but one has to say no in order to maintain one's ability to make an argument, to strike a deal, to contest the charges.
Okay, so in reality, let's be clear, Major League Baseball isn't a formal court of law. I mean, you're applying some legal structures and standards that don't exactly fit the situation. Is that fair? It
is fair. But, you know, when you read Major League Baseball's rules and bylaws, they are written by lawyers. They're written very much with that adversarial process in mind. Even the provisions to which we're referring about formal findings of fact and then conclusions is very lawyer-like and lawyerly. So certainly the entire process that baseball used at that time, and even more so today, is quasi-adjudicatory. So I just took the next step and sort of applied the everyday law governing plea bargaining to Rose's situation. In plea bargaining, if the prosecutor makes a deal and then reneges on it, the deal is off.
And your argument is they reneged almost immediately.
Yeah, I think that's clear.
Okay.
Right.
So, but let's take another look. I mean, one of the other arguments here, Rule 21, which is no betting, none, by anybody involved, is there to protect the integrity of the game. And it really grows out of and took importance out of the Blackstocks scandal, which the Reds were the other team.
Right.
The argument is in 1919, the Chicago White Sox, through the World Series, let the Reds win, and because there were gamblers who were behind it and making money on it. So here's Rose, the manager of a team, betting on his team. How can you justify that? I mean, isn't that just the same thing as the Black Sox?
Well, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm not saying Rose is innocent or that, you know, he shouldn't be punished. I'm speaking about a sense of proportionality in the punishment, but also going back to the conduct. The Black Sox threw the games, right? They 7 or 8 of them, got 9, whatever, got together and conspired, were bribed, and threw the games. Pete Rose bet on his team, in favor of his team, to win. So if anything, Rose's incentives in making those bets were to make sure his team wins, right? It was to do his best to have the team win. Isn't that what managers and players are supposed to do, right? They give that 100%. They're trying to win. So Rose betting on his team, betting on himself, again, it's contrary to the rule. I'm not saying otherwise, but we have to look at it in perspective and in proportion. Even Dowd admitted that Rose never, there's no evidence that Rose ever bet against his team. He never bet to throw a game. In fact, he almost couldn't, because every bet, people don't understand, every bet has a counterparty. Someone has to take that action. So if Pete Rose wanted to bet thousands of dollars on his team losing, and you're a counterparty, you're the bookie or whatever, and you know who Rose is, or you know his beards, his stand-ins who are going to make the bets for him, you wouldn't take that action because the manager could take steps to throw the game. So Rose only bet on his team to win. The logic and the evidence is in keeping with that, and guilty as charged, but we have to think about of what he's guilty.
And another part of that is you argue that he almost always bet about the same amount of money. He wasn't on some games betting huge amounts of money, on other games small amounts of money. So he was sort of consistently betting them to win and sort of just putting it out there on a regular basis.
There is some evidence that he varied it somewhat, not a great deal, but he did vary the amounts. But managers of baseball teams send signals to gamblers, not on purpose, of course, but send signals all the time when they put in the rookie instead of the veteran to give the rookie some seasoning. Or in the middle of a late game in June, they bring in some third-string reliever to pitch the 7th inning. Whereas in the 7th game of the World Series, they're bringing in Johnny Cueto or whatever to pitch that inning because it's all hands on deck. So the managers, by their lineups, by their decisions, by the importance of the game, are always sort of making a decision about how much they want to win. And so the argument is that Rose, by his bets, sent some signals, you know, implicit signals to gamblers, but those signals are always there, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
You also, I grew up playing golf. You make a really interesting point. I find it interesting that I never thought of before. You make a point that golf, professional golf, playing for large purses, is nothing but a bet. I mean, and there's never been a betting scandal.
Well, it's professional sports. Professional sports are sports played for money. That's why we call them that, right? And in golf, it is a great sport, but in the, for example, in the mini tours, the minor league tours that permeate West Coast Florida, those players actually play flat out for a bet. They all pay an entry fee. The organizer pools the money, and the players play for it. That's a bet. Now, even at the PGA tournament level, with Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson and all those great stars, even those folks pay an entry fee. And the entry fee, although it's heavily subsidized, of course, by title sponsors and whatnot, the entry fee is pooled, and the players becomes part of the prize pool for the players. So sports are played for money. That's what we do.
And one final point, I mean, there's a lot of points in your article, but one final point is a sort of a question of, even though Rose has admitted this, a question of proportionality compared to other things. Even though this Rule 21 exists, there's a lot of other things that people who have made it to the Hall of Fame, or at least are eligible for the Hall of Fame, have done in their lives, and they're not excluded.
Yeah, and that's a very straightforward argument, but baseball has many rules, right? Many prohibitions, performance-enhancing drugs, morals clauses as to how a player behaves off the field. The Hall of Fame, it's a simple point, but it's nonetheless true, right? That the Hall of Fame is full of players who have admittedly, knowingly, publicly, in some way or another, violated many of those rules, and they're in the Hall. Rose violated a rule too, as well, and there's no question about that. It's been 25 years. The man's in his 70s now at this point. He's baseball's all-time hits leader. Put the man in the Hall of Fame. That's my view.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting approach. I really enjoyed reading this. And it's in a journal called Nine.
Right.
And it was in about 2010 that you published this.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Very good. Thank you. Stay tuned. After the break, a great story for Easter morning.
The year was 2009. I'm a band director. She's an art teacher. We're on a plane ride. I'm reading a Time magazine article, and suddenly I just get this vision. What if we could create a philanthropic coffee roasting company that would source coffee equitably and sell it here in the U.S. And take the profits and put them back into sustainable initiatives in coffee roasting communities in the third world? And I'm like, okay, that's crazy. Like, who even does that?
Welcome back. About 4 months ago, I saw a video that told a story about a young couple in Newport who are doing something wonderful, something that seems perfect for Easter morning. Here's the opening scene of that video. I am joined now by Emily Carabello, who, along with her husband Justin, are social entrepreneurs, small business owners, philanthropists, and coffee lovers. Unfortunately, Justin woke up this morning with a fever and is not able to be with us here in the studio, so it's just you and me, Emily. But it turns out you have a whole group of people here in the studio who know your coffee shop and who go there for their breaks to get their coffee, so congratulations.
Thanks.
you've been at this since about 2009, getting the idea. What I'm particularly interested in, we'll talk about the business in a minute, this whole motivation of being connected to the people of Central America, particularly Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Sure. So my parents are on the board, and they helped start an orphanage in Nicaragua. And so we got an opportunity in about 2008 to go visit the orphanage that they were it was just very small at that point, just getting off the ground. And when we were able to see the children there and just the way they were living, it really made us come home and say, well, what can we do to give to this? Because we both worked part-time and didn't have a lot of extra money. So we kind of started brainstorming of ideas of how we could give back.
You know, the idea of the children, and we're going to hear from some of those children right at the end of the show. I mean, that's always tugs at the heartstrings. But it's more than just the children in that orphanage. It's also about who you're dealing with on a business side in Nicaragua as well, right? And how you deal with them.
So coffee has long time been a product that they don't get paid really what they need to survive. In fact, a lot of times they lose money every year if they're a coffee farmer or a coffee producer. So there's a lot of companies in the U.S. especially that are really trying to begin to pay people fairly, and we really want to be a part of that. And we want people to see that there's a person on the other side of that cup of coffee.
In fact,
that
we have
works
some
really
video.
hard.
We can show some video while we're talking here of some of those people. So
they deserve to be paid fairly, especially when so many Americans drink coffee every day, and they don't even really think about the fact that there are hardworking people on the other side of that.
And you even have a particular relationship with individual coffee growers, right? That you've struck up. As I remember, as it's told in the video, you heard about this one coffee grower, and you went down and you found him.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty miraculous. We read about him, and he won an award, and he gave away $20,000 from that award, which is pretty unusual to give it all away. So we wrote down his name, and when we were in Nicaragua, we asked the only person that we knew there if he had ever heard of him, and he had met him the week previously. So he pulled out his business card and said, yeah, do you want to meet him? We thought, are you kidding? Yes, we want to meet him.
And when you met him, and you obviously hit it off very well.
Yeah, so he gave us a whole tour, and he invited us back, and the following year we were able to come back and spend a whole day and go up into the mountains and see the way all this happens. It's an incredible process, and he ended up saying to us, I'd like to give you 1,500 pounds of my best coffee for you to reinvest all the profits back into something in Nicaragua. So we were like, what? How can that be?
So people on both sides of this equation, on both sides of that bridge that Justin talks about, are invested in the vision as well as just the business side of this.
Yeah.
So does all of what you do invest back in Nicaragua after you've sold the coffee, does it all go to the orphanage? I know he was interested in building houses.
Yeah, that's what the farmer himself who gave that money away was interested in. We give to the orphanage, but they have been able to buy a plot of land, 26 acres, and they're beginning a farm. This is now providing 30% of their food every year for them, so that it's not all just aid-based. And this is also teaching the young men skills as they're raised up. So we've been able to provide an irrigation system and a pair of oxen and running water out at that farm. So it's really turning into something that's a viable opportunity for them.
All of those very basic things. I mean, irrigation systems can be big, or they can be very small and focused. A team of oxen, that's very specific.
Yeah.
You can do that same thing back here. You're running a coffee store in Newport, Kentucky on 9th Street. We want people to know how to find it.
Yeah.
And this is a business that keeps growing, right? I mean, you just sort of, I mean, you've only been at this since 2009. How would you describe the growth of the business over that period?
Well, at the beginning it was very small, just a few of our friends or family. We'd drive a bag here, drive a bag there. But once we were able to get a large roaster, that it really exploded. We started doing farmers markets 3 times a week, and then we ended up in Velocity Bike and Bean, a coffee shop in Florence. We rented a space and shared with them for 2 years, and so then we ended up finding a little space in Newport, and then the space next door opened, and then the space on the other side opened, and now we're in the process of buying our building. We just did a successful Kickstarter and raised $47,000. That was just in December.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been like a really rapid ramp since we opened in 2013 at our actual shop.
And how many people do you employ?
10.
So 10 jobs.
Yeah.
Does that include you and Justin?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so 10 people are employed at this coffee shop.
Yes.
You're buying at rates that people in Nicaragua can
Yeah.
make a living.
Absolutely.
And then you're reinvesting some of the profit back there. How do you figure how much you want to reinvest back in Nicaragua?
That's a really, really hard decision as a small business because you have to make sure you have enough to, have to grow. But we try to
patch leaks in
Yeah.
the basement.
from the rain today, yes, exactly. So it's kind of a fluctuating amount. At the end of the year, we try to look at what can we give away and still have enough. So last year, I believe we were able to give like $10,000 to $15,000 away. And our goal, our heart is that we would be able to get big enough someday that we could give $100,000 away in 1 year.
So what is your dream, your vision for the business? Yes, you've grown, you're now, you spread out, you got more space,
Yeah.
multiple buildings, you're buying your buildings, but what are you thinking long run, or do you think long run?
I have to admit for me that this is already bigger than I ever dreamed it would be. So every step is a little bit of a surprise. But we would love to have multiple stores someday, at least in the Cincinnati area. And we really want to be big enough that we can be making a genuine impact. It's hard to make an impact with 5,000. It's great that we can do that, but we want to be a large enough company that we're genuinely able to buy large quantities of coffee from a farmer that will change their lives.
There are big coffee store chains. I won't mention anything by name, but what is it that you can offer that they can't?
Well, one of the things is everything is completely handmade. So the machines are not what's called super automatic. So each shot is pulled by hand, and each milk is steamed by hand. And so we provide everything also at what we call like a classic Northern Italian style, which means a latte is always 12 ounces. A cappuccino is always 8 ounces. That's the way they were invented. There's specific cups for them. So we kind of get in really deep. We do what's called manual pour overs. So you can pick any coffee at any time of the day and we'll make that cup just for you. And when you're in a massive chain, that's really hard to reproduce. So we do a lot more like direct, what do you want, how can we make you fall in love with coffee?
And were you a coffee aficionado before you got into this?
My husband has to take all the claim for that. I've learned along the way with him, especially on the trips where we've gotten to taste, 50 coffees at a time. I've really learned a lot doing that.
Now, do you buy from other places besides Nicaragua?
Absolutely. We have importers that we source equitably throughout the whole world. We have Ethiopians, Yirgacheffe is a great coffee. We've got Colombians. We kind of always rotate. It's what's called a single origin coffee, so that means it's not blend. And so we always have single origins as well as blends available, but they change seasonally.
And we've got less than a minute left, but how do you know that you're buying from a source that actually is paying fair wages?
Right.
And
so we work with importers that tell us how much that farmer has gotten paid, exactly what farm in what area, so we could actually go visit them and see that that's true.
And and besides that one grower, have you developed relationships with some others?
We've gotten to go to El Salvador and Costa Rica, but not yet. We hope so. We hope to be able to go to Africa and create that same kind of thing someday.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's neat.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
This is really wonderful. I am not a big coffee drinker.
That's okay.
But I think what you're doing from so many levels is so inspiring. So
thank you.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thanks.
And tell Justin I hope he feels better.
I will.
We close this morning with some scenes of the people in Nicaragua, because as Justin and Emily say, it's all about the people. And their coffee shop, just to make sure, is on 9th Street in Newport, Kentucky.
uniforme. Gracias por el uniforme. Gracias por el uniforme. Gracias por el uniforme.
Yo estoy agradecida por el uniforme.
Doy gracias a Dios por el uniforme que me dio. Le doy gracias a ustedes que los bendicieron y espero que los sigan bendiciendo. Gracias por el uniforme.
Le doy gracias por el uniforme.